Okay, this is going to be the answer key for lesson 10.3 worksheet. All right, so when we're breaking down our square roots, right, start your factor tree here. Now, everybody's going to have a little bit something a little different here, and that's okay. So, like, I've got 8 and 10, okay? And then 8 will break down to 2 and 4, and 4 will break down to 2 and 2. On 10, you're going to get 2 and 5. Again, look for pairs. Pair them up and move them out. So 2 times 2 is 4. Remember, these move to the outside, so I get 4. And then this 5 right here at the end was left over, so I end up with 4 root 5. Okay, on number 2 here, I'm going to break this down. We've got 2 and 4, and then 4 will break down to 2 and 2. So I have a pair of 2's that are going to move out, so 2 on the outside, and then I have this 2 left over on the inside. All right, so on 72, I'm going to break it down to 8 and 9, and then 8 will break to 2 and 4 will go to 2 and 2. 9 will break down to 3 and 3. So 2's pair up and move out, 3's pair up and move out. Okay, so when I move this guy and this guy out, 2 times 3 is 6 on the outside, and then I have this 2 left over on the inside, so my answer is 6 root 2. Okay, on number 4 here, I'm going to start by breaking it down to 10 and 15. My 10 will go to 2 and 5. My 5 will go to 3 and 5. So now if I look here, I have a pair of 5's that are going to move out. So I have 5 on the outside. And then on the inside, I've got 2 and 3 left over. So 2 times 3 is 6. All right, on number 5 here. Now, some of you might already know that the square root of 196 is 14, and you just knew that off the top of your head, and that's fabulous. If you did not know that, though, a lot of you guys were probably maybe starting by dividing by 2 and putting a 2 in there, and you'll get 98. 98 will break down to 2 and 49, and then the 49 will break down to 7 and 7. So when I look at my ends here, I have a 2 times 7. Both of them are moving outside, so I have a 14. There's nothing left on the inside because there's no numbers left over. So it's just 14. Again, it's 14. There is nothing left inside that radical, so we just call it 14. Okay, on number 6 here. All right, 392, so I know at least a 2 is going to go into that. So 392, I'm going to divide by 2, and I get 196. Okay, now I'm going to divide that by 2 and get 98. All right, I'm going to divide this by 2 and get 49, and then 49 will break to 7 and 7. So now I'm going to pair up my 2's and pair up my 7's and move them both out, right? The 2 and the 7 both come out, so 2 times 7 is 14. And then I have this little 2 left over on the inside, so 14 root 2 is your answer there. All right, moving over to the back page here. All right, so this guy is a difference of squares, so I'm going to break it down to r minus 7 and r plus 7, and that's going to equal 0. Again, difference of squares. Can I square root? Do I have subtraction? And can I square root? Okay, so now I've got r minus 7 equal to 0 and r plus 7 equal to 0. So I end up with 7 and negative 7 when I solve them. Okay, number 8. All right, so when we're doing zero product property, remember we got to set it equal to 0. So v squared minus 11v plus 24 equals 0. Again, I'm just moving that 24 over to the side. So now I'm looking for factors of 24 that get me negative 11. Okay, and 3 and 8 pop into my head right away. So when I look at this, now I have to have negatives so that when I take a negative times a negative, I get a positive 24. But when I take negative 3 plus negative 8, that gets me negative 11. So I have got v minus 3, v minus 8 equals 0. Okay, so then when I set them each equal to 0 and solve, I'm going to end up with v equals 3 and v equals positive 8. Okay, on this guy right here, so there's not a difference of squares. You can't square root that 8, but you do have a GCF of a v here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out a v and have v minus 8 equals 0. So now I'm going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So now v equals 0 is done. Here I'm going to add the 8 over and get v equals 8. Okay, on this guy, I'm going to go ahead and bring the negative 41x over, but when I bring it over, it's going to turn to a positive. So I've got 7x squared plus 41x plus 30 equals 0. All right, now I'm going to start my list. 1 times 7, 1 times 30, 2 times 15, let's see, 3 times 10, and 5 times 6. Now, since it's all positives, I know I'm going to have positives, and I'm looking for something that's going to get me a 41. So if I come running through, if I look here, 1 times 6 is 6, 5 times 7 is 35. When I add that up, that gets me a 41. So I have a 1, 7, and 5, 6 combo there. Okay, so I'm going to have 1x, 7x. Again, these are all positives, and on the back side, I've got a 5 and a 6. Okay, now I'm going to set each part equal to 0. So I've got x plus 5 equals 0, and 7x plus 6 equals 0. So x is going to equal negative 5. And then here I'm going to subtract the 6 over and get negative 6. And then I'm going to divide and get negative 6 sevenths. So my two answers are negative 5 and negative 6 sevenths. Okay, number 11 here. Let's see. You throw a ball in the air with initial upward velocity of 38 feet per second at an initial height of 5 feet. How long will it take the ball? How long will the ball be in the air before hitting the ground? Okay, so I know if something's hitting the ground, I know that that means my finishing height will be 0, right? It's hitting the ground, okay? So now it's telling you to use the vertical motion formula. So keep in mind that that's h equals negative 16t squared plus vt plus c, or remember we also said that could be h sub 0 just depending on what book, internet site you're using. All right, so we know the finishing height is 0. Negative 16t squared is just part of the formula. It has to do with the gravity. Okay, so my velocity, initial velocity of 38, so I've got plus 38t, and then I've got a start height of 5, okay? Now again, I want my front number here to be positive, okay? It makes the factoring easier if this is positive. So in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and just pull a negative 1 because there's no other GCFs or anything like that. So I'm gonna pull out a negative 1 and get 16t squared minus 38t minus 5. Okay, now I'm gonna start my factor. So 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and 4 times 4. And then the 5 here will be 1 times 5. All right, so now since this is a negative right here, I know that I've got a positive and negative. So I know different signs mean I'm going to subtract until I find a 38. Okay, so looking kind of here, I'm going to go ahead and flip this. And I think I'm going to do 2 times 1 is 2. 8 times 5 is 40. And then I need to make this guy a negative to get the negative 38. So I have a 2, 8, and 5, 1 combo here. So I'm going to go ahead, 0 equals. I still have my negative 1 out front. I've got 2 and 8t. Okay, on the back side, I've got a 5 and a 1. All right, so when I multiply the insides here, I want that to be negative. And when I multiply the outsides here, I want that to be positive. Okay. Now, you can always FOIL it out just to make sure you got it right. So 0 equals negative 1, 0 equals 2t minus 5, and 0 equals 8t plus 1. Okay, so now obviously we're throwing that out. On the second guy here, I'm going to add the 5 over and then divide. And when I do that, I get 5 halves or 2.5. And then on this one, I'm going to subtract the 1 over. And then I'm going to divide by 8 and get negative 1/8. And we know that we can't have a negative time, so I'm going to throw that out as well. So my answer, the ball is going to hit the ground at 2.5 seconds. That's my final answer there. All right, and number 12. Find the length and width of a rectangle that has a length of x plus 8 and a height of x when the area is 48. Okay, so first off, area, length times width, right? So I'm going to take x times x plus 8, and that's going to equal my area of 48. Now I do need to distribute so I can get this set equal to 0. So I've got x squared plus 8x equals 48. Now I'm going to go ahead and set that equal to 0 and get x squared plus 8x minus 48 equals 0. So now I'm looking for factors of negative 48 that get me 8. Let's see. Okay, so nothing's actually really popping into my head pretty quick here. So I'm going to go ahead and start a list. I'm sure it'll hit me here in a second. So I got 1 times 48, 2 times 24. Let's see, 3 would be 16. Here we go, 4 and 12. There it is. Okay, so if I'm looking at 4 and 12, I need a positive 8. We know that that's going to be a positive negative since your C value is negative there. So I'm going to have a negative 4. So I'm going to have x minus 4, x plus 12 equals 0. Now x minus 4 equals 0, so x will equal 4. X plus 12 equals 0, so x equals negative 12. Now, we can't have a negative length, so this guy's out. All right, so now if you're thinking about your rectangle here, right, you've got an x plus 8, and you've got an x. Well, if I'm plugging 4 in here, right, there's 4, and then 4 plus 8 is 12. So I have 4 feet by 12 feet for the length and width of my rectangle here. Okay, and that concludes the answer key.